Welcome back, Cracked fans, to another edition of the Cracked Interviews podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. One of the most enjoyable parts of doing this podcast is that we've gotten the opportunity here at Cracked Racquets to talk to so many different people from throughout the tennis world, whether it's players, coaches, fans, members of the media, whatever it may be. We want to try and provide the full picture for you guys, get as many perspectives for you fans to listen to so that you feel not only more engaged, but just you feel more informed as a tennis fan. And so that is why I am so thrilled to bring on tonight's guest. Fans of the American tennis scene, of the juniors in particular, will know well of his Junior Tennis Champion Center. But for our guest tonight, the UT Martin Hall of Famer, was a former four-time NCAA D2 All-American, a D2 National Doubles Champion, and the 1990 Tennis Player of the Year. He was the 2011 USOC National Developmental Coach of the Year and currently serves as President and Senior Director of Tennis at the Junior Tennis Champion Center. Vesa Ponkka, welcome to the Cracked Interviews podcast. I hope I didn't butcher your last name too poorly.
Thank you, Alex, and you did pretty well. And, we will see, if you can do it a little bit better in about half an hour.
Oh, I imagine going from Finland to Tennessee that my butchering of it was not nearly as bad as what you must have heard back then.
Exactly.
Well, Coach, let me just say it is our pleasure to have you on this podcast. And for all of those out there who haven't heard of the Junior Tennis Champion Center, one of the premier training centers in the country, can you talk a little bit about that Junior Tennis Champion Center and, what you guys are trying to do for American tennis?
It's very simple. We try to have every day to be a good training day. And we started it 20 years ago. And the whole idea was to provide simple, effective, and hopefully productive way to coach young tennis players. And no tricks, no gimmicks, just teaching the young players to work hard and dream big and then just create a growth mindset, and that's what we try to do.
And I think your alum base speaks for the success you guys have had, the obvious ones of late, the Frances Tiafos, Robin Montgomerys of the world, of course, Dennis Kudla, Vera Zvonareva, for me personally, as a big college tennis fan, Mitchell Frank, Luca Corantelli, all Junior Tennis Champion Center products. And one of the big things I do want to talk about early on, and I want to get into your coaching perspective, because I know you must have seen some incredible talents filter through over these past 20 years, but one of the most notable things about the JTCC is it's a nonprofit organization. You guys are about more than just developing, champion tennis players and people who have pro aspirations. It's about developing well-rounded athletes. And can you sort of talk about those nonprofit efforts and just what the JTCC does beyond developing, extraordinary talents, but just using tennis as a mechanism for young student athletes?
You are right. Our model is quite unique. Early on, we decided that we want to create not only great tennis players, but champions off the court also. That means that the kids will learn the value of the hard work. They will have a good manners, and they learn how to compete on and off the tennis court. All our players, they have to do community service. We are trying to create this give back mentality. As we all know, tennis players, we are trained to be fairly selfish people, and tennis coaches might be the second most selfish group of people. So we have to change the mindsets. And in our place, we have a mentoring system that the older players have to give back to the younger players, and we try to be true to that one on daily basis. So it's a little bit unique situation. About 80% of our players are all local players. We have our own talent search, and we are very proud of the fact that they stay hopefully with us for 10 plus years.
Yeah, and for your players in particular, again, I think the success speaks for itself, but you talked about, that mentality. Tennis is such an individual sport, and yet it's, from what you read, from what you hear about what you guys are doing at the JTCC, you really do have a program-wide buy-in. And I'm curious, how do you get these students, these members who come from various different backgrounds? A Frances Tiafo and a Dennis Kudla, they may both be from the DC background, but, where they come from, their parents parents and their situations completely different. How have you gotten this top to bottom buy-in? The community service. You could see, let's say I'm a 14-year-old kid and I've gone through a rough two-month tournament stretch, and now my coach is saying, hey, you have to go do community service this Monday. I'd be like, no, I don't. I got to get back on the tennis court. How do you get these young athletes, particularly because they are so young, to buy in from such an early age?
The key is to get them young. That's when we can mold it, their minds and the manners and the habits and the way of thinking. So we feel pretty confident that when we get them young, and they have such a great examples at the moment in front of them. Francis and Dennis, they have moved back to DC, and they come to train and hang around between the tournaments, and that's a great example of how the successful people are giving back. So our young kids are really spoiled in that sense, that nowadays they have a great role models, that they see that, hey, these guys are modest, humble people, and they are willing to help. Early on, everybody kind of had to take a leap of faith, and coaching staff is really important, that coaches have a teacher's mentality. I only hire coaches who have a teacher's mentality. I have done all the mistakes in the world, hiring people in the past, and I just, it's so important that they have a teacher's mentality, and then they are teaching and they are mentoring these kids, and the kids are great, when they feel like coaches are invested and they care about them. You can teach anything. And the key is that we are all engaged and we love what we do, and then after that, the teaching is actually then easy when we get into that buying, like you said, buying into it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, because I did my research for this podcast. I was trying to, learn a bit about you, A, try to learn how to pronounce your name above all else, but B, about your coaching. And that's not the first time I've heard you say, having a teacher's mentality is so important. And in an interview I watched you do for some JTCC content, you talked about how, you had the chance to coach pros after your playing career was done, and it wasn't for you. So I'm curious, a you-centric question, even more than the JTCC. When Ken Brody approached you in 1999, he said, hey, Vesa, I have this idea. What do you think? What was it about this JTCC opportunity that appealed to you?
That's a loaded question. I took a leap of faith. I left a great job, and I took a huge pay cut, and I just bought into Mr. Prodi's idea and vision, and that's one of the best decisions I have ever done in my life. But it's the main thing is that you have to like kids. You have to like challenges. That, hey, the kids they love to learn, even when the teachers are motivated and are willing to put the time and effort into it. So to me, it was really easy. I'm an extremely competitive person, and it's very important to win all the big tournaments, Kalamazoo's and Orange Balls. But when you get a little bit older, you start to see the really the big picture and important thing, and that is that giving these kids the tools to be successful, whatever they want to do. And I like to think I'm 55 years old, and I think that I'm slowly starting to mature, and I'm thinking that way. So I feel like I'm not working at all. I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm never planning to retire, and it's a great honor and a pleasure to be working with the young players.
Yeah, I mean, that enthusiasm, I can tell. I imagine it. The players must feel your enthusiasm, because, as you mentioned, you have been around the game now. You've been at the JTCC for 20 years, but involved in the game before that as well. That's interesting. You say you'll never retire, and I'm curious. This is a random tangent, but I had a coach back in the day, and I feel like everyone who's played tennis has a coach like this who, has like you, he just never missed a volley at the net. We're doing hitting drills, whatever. I never seen him miss. If he'll miss a forehand volley, never 2 in a row. You think you could make 100 volleys in a row at this point when you're, feeding at the baseline? You're like, good, forehand back cross court.
Yeah, I can if I do the counting. Then I will make it. So, but no, it's again we talk about the teacher's mentality. You have to. I believe you have to lead by example. You have to be a good role model, and you just have to care. And it sounds easy, but it is not. And I believe that all we have had those great role models and those teachers that we will remember, and I think that it's a challenge for everybody that, hey, let's try to be that person. Let's try to be that person that the young ones will still remember, hopefully 20, 30 years down the road.
Yeah, and I think beyond even the coaching, the programs you guys have, because for people who don't know, JTCC also serves as a full-time academy for those students interested in that. There's the academic portion. I believe you guys are partnered with Laurel Springs, who many know, those who do the homeschool route to pursue tennis more seriously often partner with Laurel Springs. For you as a coach, the overall mentality, again, allowing players, helping them strike that balance, because I know a lot of our listeners, either parents of young developing players or themselves young developing players. How do you guys at the JTCC strike that balance to where, again, it's some of the leadership programs off the court as well, but where these enrollees are getting the full student athlete experience?
No, it starts from the decision that we as a whole place have made already a long time ago. Education in the classroom and off the classroom is extremely important. It's the most important thing. I just give you one example. It's easy to talk about it, but I give you one example. When Francis was a junior, and he was, when he won the Orange Bowl when he was 15, the next 6 months, it was really busy. He was traveling a lot and barely had time to stay in school. And then when the U.S. Open time came, he got to the semis and but after that match, his parents and us, we sat down and he was so far behind in school. So we actually took him off the tournament for 6 months. So the next tournament he played was the following year, January. And you have to remember, we are talking about the guy who was number 2 in the world in juniors that time. So that kind of is an example that, hey, the school has to get done. And it is the most important thing with these young ones that they learn to think like that. So we don't not only talk the talk, but I would like to think that we also try to walk the walk.
Yeah, and look, that you've had students go Harvard, Yale, Virginia, Andrew Fenty, a fellow Michigan Wolverine with myself. UCLA, Duke. You can go on and on and on. I think that emphasizes not only are your kids excelling on the tennis court, but they're getting into high-level universities as well. You brought up Tiafoe. I'm not going to take the bait now, but know that I do have some questions about him coming up in the future. Sure. I do want to talk, though, about, again, a little bit more about these JTCC programs you have, because I don't think people understand how different it is what you guys are doing from so many of the local clubs out there. And I mean, you guys aren't just a local club. Obviously, you guys were designated one of the USTA regional training centers, I think the first to be designated as such. But can you talk a little bit about your other programs as well, such as, not just leadership development, but the neighborhood outreach you guys do to, find young players, that 5 through 11 age, who might not otherwise get engaged with the sport of tennis?
Absolutely. At the moment, we do it in 18 different locations in Washington, D.C., and we go to the underprivileged schools, and we just try to introduce tennis and something different. And we have done it now for about 15 years. We go through a couple thousand players basically every single year. It serves a little bit like our pipeline, but more importantly, it's the right thing to do. It's also the great leadership training for our own players, because they have to go and do it, and they will be the stars of those sessions. The coaches, we are staying back, and the young players have to do the public speaking. They have to lead the sessions, and they have to create these relationship with those younger kids. So it works both ways. So that's one way that we do it. We have been very lucky in a sense that the last 10 years, Kaiko has been our sponsor and making it possible that we can reach as many young ones here in Washington, D.C. Another thing that what we are doing, which is a little bit unique, and I'm actually very proud of it, is that we are really trying to create this little bit new mindset with the young players, and we want to create an environment here that really inspires people, and so we are now working on daily and weekly basis with the special Olympic athletes, wheelchair tennis, veterans, teachers, firemen, and these true heroes, and we want our players to be, having a chance to interact with these groups on daily and weekly basis, and it has been great so far. These informal mentoring relationships are forming all the time, and we just want to make sure that our generation of the players will, they promote inclusiveness, tolerance, diversity, and they will have this great mindset when they are 18 years old and they are going out to the world, and we are very confident that they are going to be extremely successful whatever they do.
Yeah, and even beyond that, I'll throw in another plug for you, because I know your Tennis Corps program, where you bring youth and veterans together, I think it's weekly clinics, I believe. Yeah. That's not something you see. We never had a program like that where I grew up training, and so just those special opportunities to expose these young athletes to so many different members of the community, so many different people with so many different backgrounds. Again, I can only imagine how valuable that is. And for the JTCC facilities, because we haven't even talked about them yet. The fact that you don't often find these 32 court behemoths not located in California or Florida, right? It's so rare to see that many courts assembled in one place. How valuable is it to have these JTCC facilities, to have not just the hard courts but clay courts as well, to have the full-fledged athletic training in the gym? Can you talk about how important it is to be able to offer that sort of well-rounded aspect from the tennis itself?
Of course, it is important. It's I like to think that we have no excuses not to produce good players and good human beings. It's great. We have a red clay courts, green clay, like you said, indoor hard, outdoor hard, and we have everything what we need. When we designed the place, it was very important to us not to make it fancy. So people who have visited our place, they can see it's very practical. We have everything we need, but it's nothing fancy. It's our fitness facilities are almost like from the Rocky movie, and in a sense that it's designed that way. Again, we want to make sure that our players have everything that is needed, but also that they stay humble. And we are very lucky to have this great facility. It's 20 years old, and like I said, we have absolutely no excuses not to produce tennis players.
Are you more of a green clay or a red clay sort of coach?
I'm a red clay guy. I grew up in Europe, and I love when my socks are red and my shoes are red. So. I'm a red clay court guy.
No, again, no excuses. That's how you're working hard. I like to hear it. Or another random question. Again, we talked about the wheelchair-based tennis and stuff, and I've had the opportunity to play wheelchair tennis before. I don't think people realize how difficult it is, how tremendous these wheelchair tennis playing athletes are. I mean, have you ever gotten to play yourself? I think it's brutal.
I have been in a wheelchair, and you are right, it is very difficult. And it's remarkable what those athletes are doing. What is really neat, what we do in our place, we actually have young kids who unfortunately have to stay in the wheelchair, and we actually have our kids teaching them also in the wheelchair. So it's really fascinating, and they are bonding right away. So our able-bodied players, 12, 13, 14-year-olds are teaching the wheelchair players, and they are also in the wheelchair. And it's just fascinating how it breaks down all the barriers, and and they start to create friendships, and it's really neat to see.
Yeah, and again, getting back to this theme, it's very easy for us from the outside to understand why there's been so much buy-in from the students who have been to and trained at the JTCC, why they speak so highly of it. And, again, getting back to the theme, you talked about earlier, Francis and Dennis coming in between tournaments to just hang out around the grounds and hit there. But I know you guys are also able to host some pretty cool events at your facility as well. How helpful is that in terms of exposing players to higher level tennis? How important do you think it is for those young aspiring tennis players to, not only play their local tournaments, but to go out and actually experience college tennis? You guys, I believe, are the host site for the Maryland women's team, but also, experience all of those, the higher levels of tennis that are out there.
I think that is extremely important. We are actually, in what we do as a teachers, we have to create an environment that the kids can dream. And you can only dream when you have some examples and you can have some visuals. And that makes it much easier. So as you mentioned, the University of Maryland, they train every single day in our place and they play all their matches. We also have plenty of other schools, Georgetown and George Washington University, playing matches and sometimes training. So our kids get exposed to the college tennis on daily basis, which is great. We have hosted plenty of pro tournaments, and so that was helpful for the kids to see that what it takes to play in that level, and also we host ITF Category 1, a big tournament right before the U.S. Open. Many times, all the best junior players are coming here to play the warm-up tournament before the U.S. Open. So I'm a big believer that getting kids to ready to dream, they also have to see and they have to experience, they have to see that, hey, it is possible. And that's why it's so important to have our alumni coming back, because our kids, they can believe.
Yeah, and I will say this. I remember distinctly, and I don't remember the year. I think it was 15 or 16, or maybe it was 14 or 13, Riley Opelka playing Tim Van Ruchtjeven. I definitely butchered that name. In the final of that tournament, I think Colette Lewis posted the video on YouTube, and that was the first time I was like, wow, this Riley guy is really something. So, even from afar, just seeing that level of tennis, it's absolutely incredible. One other thing I wanted to talk about the JTCC, and then I do want to get into the nitty-gritty coaching wise, but I know you guys ensure participation for players, even those who require financial assistance. I think it's something provided more than 800,000 need-based and merit-based grants in 2016, and I'm sure you guys continue to do that year in, year out. Why is that important for you guys? I know you're a nonprofit, but given the success you guys have had, certainly you could have made the change of that by now. There's definitely a model to plenty of financial success there for you if you guys want it. Why does continuing to make the JTCC a place where all players can come play tennis, why does that continue to be so important to you guys?
It is because we all are aware how insanely expensive sport tennis is. Not only here in USA, but in all over the world, and it's so much talent is lost because it's just it's not possible to get high quality training because it's so expensive. So that was one of the first ideas that Mr. Prodi came up, that we have to provide the families that the kids are working really hard and they are good kids and they want to play college tennis, that we have to be able to provide them a high quality training. So we created a financial aid. We have a group of great people who are doing a lot of fundraising. We fundraise a lot of money, and all that money goes straight to the financial aid. So we are very unique in a sense that our nonprofit, everything goes back to the juniors, and our founder Ken Prodi is not taking anything out of it. I mean, he has put a tons of money in it over the years. Luckily, he doesn't need to do it anymore. And but we work really hard to do the fundraising. We have a great team to do it, and it is really important that these great families and the kids who really want to achieve something special, that they have a chance to have an access to the hopefully high quality training.
Well, for those of our listeners out there who, and I don't know how you couldn't be are impressed by what's going on at the JTCC who want to help contribute, is there any way they can get involved?
Absolutely. You just go to our website and jtcc.org and just contact us and we will welcome all the help that we can get and I really appreciate that one. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, and seriously, jtcc.org. This is the sort. If there are more JTCCs out there, I don't think any of us will need to worry about the health of the American men's or women's tennis game at any time. And I think the fact that we see players like Robin, like Francis, it's this first wave of players who, and even the Tommy Pauls Opelkas of the world, there is a generation of Americans already on the rise. But you talked about lost talent, and I want to use that to segue into our conversation about tennis. And for you in particular, coming from Finland, finding UT Martin playing Division II tennis, that's not an ordinary path. So for you, how did you find your way to college tennis? And as someone who played D2, you have the chance to, discuss with your students there are more options out there than just D1 tennis. Why was that the place for you?
No, it's pretty simple. When I left Finland, I was 18. I moved to Germany. I played there 3-4 years. I played pros. I played a Bundesliga. Made a few points there and here. Didn't make enough money to live on it. So when I was actually 23-year-old freshman when I decided that hey, I have to now get my education. And those days. D2 was only chance that I could stay 4 years and get paid my education. So I knew nothing about University of Tennessee at Martin. They just happened to be the first one to contact me and my coach in Germany, and it was kind of just taking a leap of faith, and it worked out great. It was a great place to study. There was really nothing else to do, so I studied hard, and that time the college tennis was kind of easy, but I went there to study. I got my undergraduate and my MBA, so it worked out great. But do
you think? Sorry to cut you. Do you think had you not played at UT Martin, you would have, as you to quote your term, would have been a lost talent? You wouldn't have found a future in the sport. The reason I ask is because it's a big thing we have whenever we talk to college coaches. Of there are more options out there than just the top D1 schools. You can't all be Andrew Fenty or Luca Corntelli or Mitchell Frank and go to a Michigan or a Virginia. So how helpful and beneficial was it for you to get to keep playing tennis and get your education? Do you think you go to college without that sort of opportunity?
No, I mean that to come from Europe to here to college is extremely expensive. So I was very practical about it. I decided that whoever will contact me first and will pay my way, hey, that's going to be my home for the next couple of years. And so I was very practical about it. When you were a player, you thought that nothing is better than being a player, and that is true when you are playing. But when you get into coaching, and if you really, get going and everything, I mean, I have to say that playing is great and being a player, but nothing is better than being a coach. So I believe that I found tennis already when I was a little kid, and I always wanted to be part of it, and as a player you think that this is the only thing that matters, but actually being a coach is nothing is more important than that.
Yeah, and I'm curious because for all of these coaches who stay involved with the game so long, I mean, for me, for just some perspective for you, I'm 24, but I already know I love tennis. Like, I just can't get away from it. And for me, it was because I was a little bit chubbier when I was younger, and I used tennis, and it empowered me to take a hold of my situation, to get into the sort of shape I wanted to be in, to be more comfortable, on the court, to be more confident off of it as well. What was it about the game of tennis that kept calling back to you?
I mean, when I think that it's with a lot of people. I did all the team sports, but it's just something about tennis. That warrior and gladiator mentality that you are alone and you just go and battle. It's just something that really I was drawn into it, and then my coach in Europe and Germany was Nicky Pilic, who was big fan of a great Australian generation of 50s and 60s. There are no excuses. You just when you step on the court, you declare yourself fit to play. So all these little things, they made an impression, and I still believe in those values that tennis, in my book, is the very best sport to prepare for your rest of your life, and it is extremely demanding sport to get to the top. So it teaches you a lot of life lessons.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The fact you have to learn to problem solve, you have to learn to adjust if things aren't working, all of these different things. And yeah, take control of your own performance. It's just you out there. Like, I'm sure there are kids who want to come back and say, hey, like, you're not coaching me well. And it's like, well, I can only do so much. You're the one out there playing on the court. And so I completely agree with you. I think it is why we all enjoy tennis so much. Of course, there's also the unintentional comedic factor. For every tweener attempted, every shank gone wrong, there's every blow up. That's half the fun as well. But for you've talked about your love of coaching, and you've talked about the teacher's mentality, and evidently, it must be working, as you've stayed in coaching for as long as you've had, and had the sort of success you have. But over your 20 years, you've seen the game develop. You've seen courts slow down. You've seen baseline bashing become more of a thing. I'm curious, how have your coaching philosophies changed as the game has changed? Have you changed any of your approaches, or can you approach coaching a student the same way you did in 2000 now in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I started it in the early 90s, my coaching. So I have been coaching a little bit more than 30 years. That is a really good question. I do not think that the game itself, the basics of the game, have really changed in a sense. I believe that those great champions from 50s and 60s would also be great champions nowadays. The surfaces will change, the balls will change, the rackets, you name it. But being a champion, you need to go internal strength and your intangibles, and I don't think that those have changed. And so you're asking about the coaching philosophy. I can tell you that my maturity level has changed, in a sense that when you're a younger one, in early days in JTCC, we had this really complicated coaching philosophies and everything, because we wanted everybody to know how smart we are. And the funny thing is that nowadays everything is much simpler, and I believe that the simple is good. And just to give you an example, our coaching philosophy is a one sentence nowadays, and that is trust your training. And that is kind of a result of 30 years of trying to figure it out, what this game and what the training is all about. And we as a team came to the point that, hey, it's all about trust, and there needs to be a trust between the player and the coach and the parents and parents and the players. And it's just trust your training. It's a very loaded concept, but that is our coaching philosophy at the moment.
Yeah, and I know when you've talked about that coaching philosophy in the past, you've talked about both the importance of patience and the importance of confidence and belief. I'm curious to stay on this. Maybe your perspective has changed over your course of coaching. Similarly, you talk about trusting your trainee. How much of the breakdown of the game now is, physical versus mental? How much of it is what goes on in your, in that little space of, in your brain? I suppose I'm doing the gesture of in that little 5-foot box that is your brain, but you can't see that. But how much is it mental versus physical? Because there's the argument you can coach anyone to hit a forehand really hard, hit a backhand really hard, but what's going on in your head, that's what separates the champions.
No, absolutely, and I think that it has always been like that. That if you have a courage to hit the right ball at the right time. But what has changed, that there's no question that our game has become much, much more physical, which I think that is great, because it makes our game so demanding, and it makes so unique, because it's technically, tactically, physically, and emotionally, you have to be operating at your peak, and I don't think that there are other sports that would check all those boxes. And top of that one, it's an individual sport. So so the physical aspect, of course, is huge. The speed used to be a difference maker. Your movement and your speed. But you know what? Nowadays everybody can move. The technique used to be a difference maker, but the fact is everybody has a good technique nowadays. So it all comes back to the mental and emotional side of it, and I think that that's what makes a difference and makes our game so uniquely demanding.
So, slight counterpoint, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. My argument, and I'm a big fan of progress. I just think,
Sure.
As we continue to move on, things should be continuing to get better. Otherwise, what are we doing? And my question to you, I guess, is, you put an athlete like a Mitchell Frank, you put an athlete like an Andrew Fenty back in 1950. You're telling me they're not just running on the Rod Lavers and Roy Emersons of the world?
What do you mean exactly?
I mean, just the type of athletes, the wherewithal of, I feel like the Emersons and the Lavers, they were serving volleyers. They don't even know that you can grind 20 balls away at the baseline, do all of these things. Everyone had the mentality of attack, attack, attack. I just feel like the way the game's changed, and maybe it depends on the rackets you're using. If you give Laver and Emerson the sort of frames we have now, maybe their game adjusts. But I think the game has gotten better. I think the best players now are better than the best players of the 2000s even, or the 90s or the 80s. Is that crazy?
No, you are right, but just look at it. When you look at pictures of let's say Björn Borg and Jimmy Connors playing, you would think, and I was lucky enough to follow those guys, and you would think that it's not going to get any better than that. It's not going to get any faster than that. Now you look at it back and it looks like a slow motion. But what is scary when you really think about it, now we are looking at it, great players like Nadal and Djokovic and Federer, but I can promise you 10 years, 15 years from now, those guys are looking slow. So, but it doesn't discount the fact that these are all great champions. And that's why the winning something big and everything, it takes a special person, and I'm totally convinced that Rod Lavers and Björn Borgs, they would be absolutely successful if they would have gone through the training and the rackets and everything, because they had the champion's mindset, they had those intangibles. But there's no question that if you take a player from the 50s or 60s and now you put them against Nadal, yeah, it's a little bit different and more physical and faster game, but I don't think that's fair to compare like that. You have to compare that the champion's mentality, and somebody like Björn Borg would absolutely be a champion nowadays if and when he would have gone through the same training and everything that these guys are going to.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that, and that's the much more nuanced take. I like to put a little flair on it. That's why
sure.
I'm in the show business, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, no, that's perfect. I love that. And so you talk about that physicality and how that element is now so important in the modern game. One guy I know you must know quite well, given his time at the JTCC, a guy I wrote about recently on our website, crackedrackets.com, Frances Tiafoe, who I think you look early in his career, he's already an ATP title champion. He's made a quarterfinal at the Grand Slam level. He's made a quarterfinal at the Masters level as well. I think certainly physically he has the skills for what it takes to be a successful professional athlete. But you talked about, everyone has pretty good form now. I think, the big thing for Francis, and I wrote about this, is the forehand still for him. And so I'm curious, you see a guy like Francis and, that there is that one quality about him that it seems that people continue to attack. I guess the larger question is, how important is it in your game now, to have one sort of, the big serve, big forehand? That was a model for American tennis for a long time. I feel like that model is outdated. Like, that would no longer work. Do you think that's fair to say?
I think that it's fair to say when you are looking at, winning Grand Slams and being top 5 and top 10. I think that you have to have a complete game nowadays. I don't think that you have a choice. The level is such that you have clear weaknesses. If you cannot move well, or if you cannot hit a certain post, then you will be found out. There's no question about that. You have to have a very close to be a complete game.
Yeah, and I'm curious because in terms of becoming well-rounded versus, accentuating your strengths from a coaching perspective. Let's say you have a player who they're going to be winning matches. Their road to the tennis scholarship is the serve plus the forehand.
Yeah.
From a coaching perspective, how much would you emphasize, working on those traits that are winning you matches versus, working on the other skills, rounding everything off? How do you recommend maintaining that balance?
I think that every player has to find their game style, and many times it goes with their personality, what kind of people they are. But it's really important that you don't try to copy other people. You have to find your own game style, and that's actually exciting part of coaching and being a player. And it's much more difficult than it sounds. But same time, you have to be solid. You cannot have clear weaknesses, because doesn't matter how tough you are or how mentally you can handle things. And if you have clear weaknesses, then you are going to be in trouble.
Yeah, and to Francis's game in particular, the point I made in the article, and I'm curious your perspective on this, I do think the forehand as of right now, it just seems that players are able to target with their big first serve, go to that side, draw a slice response from him, and just get him playing defense from the onset. What have you thought about Francis's continued development on the Pro Tour?
I think that talking about the forehand, I have known Francis when he, all his playing career, and I can tell you that, I have seen through the history, I have seen a lot of different kind of looking forehands and strokes. And the thing with Francis' forehand is that I think that if and when he moves well and he's precise with his footwork and contact point, that forehand is a great weapon, and it can work absolutely. People are saying, some coaches are saying that he cannot pull it down the line. Absolutely he can, but he has to position and move himself extremely well. And Francis is a little bit sluggish when it comes to, positioning himself. So I think that, hopefully this year and in coming years, he will get his precise footwork. We all know he's a great athlete, but he's a little sluggish and careless with his setting up, and that forehand. I give you an example. He has to find the way how to use that forehand. It has so much rotation. It is so difficult to read, and when he hits it well, it's one of the best forehands in the game. And I'm sure you remember a Swedish player called Stefan Edberg.
We've met once or twice.
Exactly, and his forehand, it wasn't anything beautiful. It looked really bad, but he found the way to use it for his game style, and that's what I'm talking about. That these players have to learn to use their strokes and in a way that it will fit their game style. And Stefan Edberg was a great example. You wouldn't teach Stefan's forehand to anybody, but it gave him a chance to get a half a step quicker to the net, and it worked very well for him. Francis's forehand has I think that I saw the study that only Jack Sock and Nadal have more rotation on the ball, and something like that. So, and I have seen that ball, and he just needs to absolutely do a much better job, to have a precise and great footwork. You see him getting caught when somebody returns to the middle of the court, and those are the things that he's working on with his coaching team. And I'm confident that that forehand will be looked up in a coming years as a huge weapon.
Yeah, it's certainly, and I think we see it, the success he has on the first serve when he can get a ball that, is slow, draw a slice with that serve, get to set on that first forehand. I agree with you. It's as big and dangerous of a shot as anyone, but I'm curious, you talk about his forehand and, I agree with you. I think all of the tools are there, but, certainly with the footwork, it all just requires perfect timing, and perhaps the margin of error is just a little bit smaller for him than others.
Exactly.
But in terms of structural change, and I would never ask, what changes would you make to Francis's forehand? I wouldn't want to put you in that position. But I would ask, at a certain point in a player's game, does it come to where, the strokes just are what they are and you don't want to tinker with them anymore? Or do you think tinkering with the stroke, maybe even big structural changes, can still happen? Maybe, Francis is the exception because he's playing professionals, but even when you're 16, 17 years old, you can still make a big change to your ground strokes.
I think that yes, you can, if it's done with the right way and making sure that the player doesn't lose the confidence. Because when the player loses the confidence, then it's an absolute uphill battle to get it back, even when it comes to the technique and making some really big changes. I like the words that you were using, making adjustments, making small changes there and here. And when you make enough these small changes, they end up being a major change. And that's why I think that we are so lucky to have these great three players, Federer and Djokovic and Nadal, because the reason why they are still on the top, not only because the intangibles are great, but they are learning all the time and they are making these little changes. I look at Nadal's serve. I mean that every season he comes up with something little different, and I think that mindset and mentality is really important. So to answer your questions, it's not ideal to change somebody's stroke totally when they are 16, 17. It can be done, but it's difficult. You would like to do those big changes when the kids are really young. But if you do some small adjustments with a great plan and consistency, they actually end up, the change is actually going to be big. And I think that should be the approach when coaches know what they are doing.
Yeah, and thankfully for Francis, he can always go back to the JTCC to get that sort of advice, get back on the court with and get a good training block in. Another player at the JTCC who's had tons of success, we got the chance to talk to her on the Cracked Interviews podcast at the end of last year, Robin Montgomery, who I believe it was Orange Bowl, not Eddie Hur, right, where she ended up taking home the title.
She won the. We are very lucky. It's. I was just talking to somebody that, Francis was 15 when he won the Orange Bowl 18s, and Robin was 15, or is 15 when she won the Orange Bowl. And Francis, to his credit, is kind of mentoring Robin and being kind of the example. So it's pretty neat. It's pretty rare, but it's good to see.
Yeah, and so I'm curious for you guys, and, maybe it doesn't have to be for her tailored specifically, but for someone at that point of their career. Now you've had the chance to do this with the Francises and the Dennises, and Mitchell Frank obviously had a ton of success in his career as well. What does the development path in your mind look like for someone who has that sort of young success at a young age? You talked about for Francis, it was making sure he's still well-rounded, focusing on the off-court stuff as well. What does the path look like for someone in that position?
I think that keeping distractions to the minimum, learning to work on daily basis well, having of course the big goals and dreams there, but learning to focus on that every day counts, and just trying to get better a little bit. It sounds easy, but it's really difficult, especially with the young players when there's a little hype going on. So if you can stay level-headed and just focus on getting better, working on your game, and good things will happen. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it is extremely important, and it takes a strong team around the player that team allows that one to happen.
Yeah. Well, off of that, I'm curious because you talked about the importance of Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, the example they've set. I'm going to throw Andy Murray in that conversation because I'm a big Ford proponent myself. So it's just a little bias thrown in there. But Why do you think those? Is it a testament to their greatness? I suppose that the big three continue to be winning all of the slams. Is it just they're doing something differently? Why do you think they have continued to have the success at that level, and some of the next gen guys, while getting closer, have still ultimately come up short?
I have a theory. I think it's a combination of the things. We are witnessing something very special with these 3 or 4 players you mentioned. There's no question about it. I think that, we look back and they will be will be the greatest ever. No question about it. But I have to say that how I look at it, I think that these young guys are just not as good as everybody thinks they are. What I mean by it is that when you are in that early 20s or 23, 24, and then the guys who are 38 and 34, they win all the slams, you know what, it means that you might not be as good as everybody thinks that you are. I really think that these guys got to be winning these slams. It is really amazing that they are not winning slams yet. And of course, Federer and Nadal and Djokovic, they are absolutely great. But the fact is that Federer has lost 2 steps. Nadal has lost a 1 step, and Djokovic is about to lose a step. And they are still winning all these slams. And we know that the tennis is a game of inches, and we are talking about these guys losing some steps. So these younger guys, I think that they have to step it up, and it's time for them to start to win these slams. So I think it's a combination of these 3-4 guys are so special. They are learning consistently. They are looking the ways to improve. But you know what? When you are in your early 20s and mid 20s, you got to take the old guys out. I mean that. I think that needs to be said. And I hope that I'm a big fan of these 3, but these young guys got to take them out sooner than later.
Non-JTCC players, who's your favorite of the young guys? Who do you think's the one who could get it done soonest?
I'm a big fan of, and I think that he will be the future number 1. I'm a big fan of Felix. I think that there's a guy who is solid everywhere, great athlete, seems to be working hard, great mentality. I think that it's a matter of time when I think that he will be number 1 in the world in 3-4 years. Meanwhile, Thiem, of course, I appreciate his work and everything, but now he has had 3 slam finals and he's still 0-3. We have to remember, I think it was Murray and Lendl were 0-4, or then they won the finals. So winning is so difficult. But I think that the next one, I think that maybe Tsitsipas is maybe the guy who can win the next one. I was very impressed with Medvedev, last year, and it would be interesting to see how he responds this year. But there's a group of 6 to 10 players that one of those guys can win a slam. But the key is there a guy who is going to win 2 or 3 slams in the next couple of years, and who will start to kind of put number of slams together? Time will tell. I like Felix. I just I saw him I have seen him since he was 13 years old, and I'm just impressed how he's progressing and how he handles himself. So I'm a big fan of him.
No, I love it. I have made this case on prior podcasts. I would say, and you get to see them in person, that the forehands of Felix and Rublev, they just sound different than anyone else I've ever heard. And even Federer, even Djokovic, just the ball coming off of their strings, the amount of turn and torque they get into the shot, it's just different. And,
it is. It's a great ball, and it's effective, and these guys learn how to use it right and pick up their spots a little bit better. It's going to do a lot of damage.
Yeah, and then, the flip side, I guess on the women's side, why do you think we've seen so many young players being able to break through? And, it's the Kennans, the Osakas, the Andreescus, Sabalenka this week, and they all seem to play differently as well. So do you think it's that, there is no Federer, Djokovic, Nadal standard bearer? Serena just not at that level?
I think that, Alex, that's a good point. I think that there's a vacuum at the moment in the women's game, and which is, everything goes in the cycles. The men's game used to have it, and Williams sisters, they are past their prime. So I think there's a vacuum, and I think that it will be pretty interesting to see who is the next one who will step it up and who will become that next superstar. Osaka was pretty promising the last 18 months, but we will see if she's able to keep it going. But I think that there's a vacuum, and let's see who will take advantage of it.
Yeah, hey, my money's on Robin Montgomery. I think she's this young up-and-coming talent. I heard her coaching situation is really good, and she's the one to pick. No, that is I completely agree with everything you said. And last question for you, because you've been so kind with your time. You brought something up, and it's another change that I think I see coming in tennis. And you mentioned you played Bundesliga tennis, and I don't think that's something many people in America are well aware of. The club tennis scene that goes on in Europe, and it's world team tennis-esque for people, for maybe the comparison you can draw in terms of the sort of match format. Can you talk a little bit about the club tennis scene in Europe? And then also, do you think team tennis is do you think that's the way the game is going? And I know Laver Cup, ATP Cup, Davis Cup, Fed Cup are the obvious ones, but I could see a world where there's more team tennis on the horizon. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Okay, now first, a little bit about the club tennis and the culture in Europe. In the 80s, when I was playing, it was absolutely huge. In German Bundesliga, we had a Becker and Villas, and we had Wilanders. We had all the best ones were there. The money was good. They got money, and that was, they used it as a training block, and then they got some matches. So it was fantastic. It was great for the young player because you could earn a little bit money, and then you could train and play with the really great players, and you always had the next match coming up, because in a pro tour when you lose, and then you have to wait for the week. And in Germany and in France, the club tennis, the culture is fantastic. And the younger kids, they actually learn to play against different styles because of that one. So after European Union started it in early 1990s, it has changed a little bit, and I don't think that the money is as big as it used to be, but the culture is still there. The club tennis is a big deal. They have sponsors, and those matches that they play, they are big deal. And I think that it's good training ground in a sense. It has a, it can be also dangerous because it can spoil players, and I think that German Bundesliga spoiled a couple of generations years ago because the players became kind of big stars within their own country, and they didn't feel like they need to be traveling a lot. So it goes both ways, but the culture is fantastic because the club means a lot, and they play for the club, and I was always a big fan of it, and it helped me a lot, to learn and be around those great players. What you ask about what direction tennis is going, I think that it's pretty clear at the moment that they are pushing more and more for the team competition, and I am a traditionalist in a sense that I think that there are certain things that just should left untouched, but I'm all for team as long as they leave the Grand Slams alone. I want that reference point that you can, the Grand Slam needs to be left alone. I mean, tennis has a big history of exhibition tennis. I mean that in the 40s and 50s, the pro tennis was all about exhibitions. And still exhibitions are part of the game, and I really don't mind if they make some more team stuff, as long as I know that Grand Slams are left alone, and we have a kind of measuring points, that we can compare the Grand Slams over the years. But I have to tell you, I have to go on the record in a sense that I know that all the changes, they need time and patience, but I was kind of disappointed with this Davis Cup. I'm a big fan of the Davis Cup, and it really didn't. I didn't get a great taste of it. First of all, I'm a crazy tennis guy. I love to watch tennis, and it was very difficult to find the Davis Cup on TV. I mean, I couldn't. It took me forever to see some matches, and then I mean that. You are in Spain, and then you have a Belgium and Colombia playing in front of 27 people. I mean that hurts me. And Davis Cup is, the crowd makes Davis Cup special, and who in Spain is going to go and watch Belgium and Colombia, even if Belgium has a top 10 player in Coffin. And it kills me to see these empty seats and empty stadiums, and I hope that they will make adjustments and they will get it going, but I'm a big fan of the home crowd. So, or you go to the hostile environment and you have to survive. I talked to Francis when he went to, he played Coric in a fifth match in Davis Cup, and he said that he was so proud because he was able to silence the crowd. And, those kind of things are pretty neat, and I hope that they will do well with the Davis Cup because it's such a big tradition in our game. But I was it made me nervous last year. I have to admit, and I hope that they will tweak it and they will get it right.
I think that's completely fair, and I think there's something too, of course, from a marketing standpoint, doing it all in 1 week. I think we can all understand that, and maybe if you tell all of the top players, hey, this is the only week you have to worry about Davis Cup, you're going to get more buy-in from the rest of them. But yeah, to your point, I mean, the home crowd is what makes the Davis Cup tie, the home atmosphere, and teams going on the road. I think it was when Andy Murray was playing in front of a Belgian crowd when he won that first Davis Cup title for the UK a couple of years back, and just that moment, you could tell how special it was. Or when they clinched the match in doubles, him and Jamie over Australia, exact same sort of thing where you just don't get that if you're playing at a neutral site. I do want to ask one reform about this. Can be our last one, I swear.
No problem.
But on-court coaching, because that's another one of those things, and I'm sure I can guess where you stand on no ad versus ad scoring. But for on-court coaching, they're already doing it on the WTA. They're doing it, I believe, at the junior level in certain USTA tournaments. We talked earlier about the importance of tennis, the ability for it to you learn to problem solve, you learn all of these different skills. But what do you think about the idea of on-court coaching?
I'm against it because of the fact that I want this game to be one of the very few sports in the world, unique sport, that the demands are so different that you are totally alone. And when you play in the big arena in front of people and you are struggling, it feels like you are naked. And that feeling is really real and strong, and you have to overcome it, and you have to find the way to problem solve. And I would love to see our game to stay like that, because then we would be unique, we would be different. I understand that there's a little entertainment value when there's a mic and the coach can talk a little bit, but honestly, I don't think that makes a difference. I think that the price we might end up paying is that we lose this uniqueness, and I think that we should market the game differently. I think that we try to make it cool and hip, but why don't we make it the most demanding sport in the world? I mean, make it something extremely special. And I'm a big fan of the fact that the players have to, when they step on the court, one guy is going to lose and one guy is going to win, and they have to figure it out. And it's like a boxing, and I'm just that is one of those core values that I love about this sport. And look, it's not going to ruin the game, but I just feel like it's just takes a little bit that uniqueness away, and we become like everybody else.
Sure. I'm going to give the slight counterpoint again, and I'm curious
Sure,
of your thoughts.
sure.
I think maybe in the juniors up to, 16s, 8. I mean, maybe the entire juniors, that makes sense because that's when the most problem solving needs to occur. And there is something to, Medvedev was out there down 2-0 in that U.S. Open final. And for him to just find a way to stay alive, for him to take sets 3 and 4 without any sort of coaching advice, that is, that's why that match was as special as it was. But at the same time, we want the game to be as good as it can be. We want these players playing their best possible tennis at all possible times. There is something to, let's say you're down 5-love in a first set in a random, Grand Slam match, and you can have your coach come out and say, hey, like, this is what you're doing wrong. It's so clear to me from outside of the match, and you're not seeing it, but once you see it, you're going to fix everything. And it leads to a better quality match. It leads to a higher level of tennis being played from the fans' perspective, and, ultimately it is, I suppose, the fans paying the bills for a lot of these players. Wouldn't it make sense to try and get that sort of better tennis out of these players as they're competing?
I get your point, but how about if I tell you that if somebody cannot figure it out what is happening when they are getting their butt kicked 5-0, they are not maybe that good anyway. I mean, my point is that the top players, that quality that you want to see and the people want to see, they can figure it out. And that's why they are so good. And I don't think that maybe that short-term fix for the little quality for that match is worth of changing the fabric of the game. And I think that there's in these team competitions, I'm absolutely for it. It brings it a good show, and it's entertainment, and it's great, and it can be a great learning experience. But when it really counts, I would love it to be that mano mano. You just step into the court, and one of you guys are going to figure it out.
And I think to add to your point, the idea that not every player, financial background is going to be able to afford to travel with a coach. So those that can versus those that can't, you're creating an issue there. I do think I lean your way. Just wanted to give the slight counterpoint.
Yeah, no, look, it's. I don't think that coach. I think that it's a great learning experience, and when it's done right, it can help. But I'm talking about when it really counts. I think that we want to see that raw, the raw excellence there, that somebody has to dig deep inside and find these answers. I think that that's fascinating, and I think that has so much value. I mean, that you look at these top guys, I mean, how many times we have seen them to figuring it out. I mean, that of course, they might get some signals from the stands and that, but it's all about them, having a, skills and the belief and confidence to hang in and figuring it out. And I think that that's what our game is all about. Our game is it's not figure skating that you get extra points for the style. I mean, it's these different athletes, hanging in there and trying to figure out how can I kick this guy out of the tournament. And I think that's the beauty of the sport for me personally.
No, I love that. And I mean, the only time I think, as you mentioned, coaches in the team environment makes perfect sense. And I would love to see, someday that the two Laver Cup teams are tied and they just say, okay, Federer, you're going to play with Borg. Kyrgios, you're going to play with McEnroe. And we're going to do doubles to decide this, coach and player versus coach and player. That, to me, would be the best purpose for a coach.
I mean, like you mentioned Laver Cup. It's so funny, I grew up and my biggest idol was Bjorn Borg. I mean, that he was the man. But I have to tell you, when I'm watching Borg in the Laver Cup, I mean that he's an Iceman and he doesn't say much, but I mean it's pretty funny. He sits there and claps a few times and that's it.
No, Federer is player, coach, manager.
Absolutely.
And Bjorn is actually just the figurehead who they're like, hey, just look good, like slick back that hair.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he plays that role to a T. All right. Truthfully, last question, I promise, and my producer's
problem.
rolling his eyes at me in the background. But my question to you is, was there ever a point in his time at the JTCC where you stopped this player and said, listen, Mitchell, if you hit another drop shot, you're done. Like just 10 push-ups, just start running. Like no more drop shots from you today.
It wasn't a drop shot, there has been, I'm known to, in my moments, I have been a little bit extreme a few times there and here, and so you have to get the message through somehow, so you mentioned Mitchell Frank. You actually, he was like a machine. He was just programmed to overlast you and beat you mentally and physically. But the funny thing about it is, I give you a very quick story. He was such a machine that he was playing a tournament in Belgium, and my friend Frank Salazar was coaching him there, and he was there. And then during the match, I get a text from Frank that, you don't believe what just happened. I said, what? I'm watching a Mitchell just hit a tweener. And that was like the biggest miracle in the history of the game, that out of his disciplined game, he came and hit a tweener. And it was so unique that actually Frank texted me from Belgium to hear that happened. So sometimes we have to let it go and just smile about it.
No, I tell Luca every time he doesn't slice a backhand, he should text me.
Exactly. No, here we go.
Yeah,
that's right.
No, and we could go on and on, but seriously, Coach, thank you so much for taking the time one last time, because I know, again, we are such big fans of your program at the JTCC and what you guys are doing. Can you let our listeners know how they can get involved and support your guys' efforts?
Absolutely. The best thing would be that whenever you have a time and you are in Washington, D.C., come and see us. We are in College Park, and I would like to think that you would feel that we have hopefully a special spirit in our place. It's a spirit of giving back, and it's an environment that learning takes place. And if you don't have a chance to come and visit us, then please visit our website, jtcc.org, and anywhere you can support us. Just when you see our players in the tournament, say hi and talk to them, or anywhere you can support it. We all benefit out of it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Again, jtcc.org for all of you who want to learn more. Coach Vesa Ponkka, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on the Cracked Interviews podcast. And seriously, anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's always great to talk tennis with the people who love it. So,
Well, I promise you I do. You would be giving me push-ups. You would say, Alex, or you'd just be like, get off the court. Like, that's enough for you today.
Okay. No, hey, maybe we can. By the way, maybe you have to come and visit us one of these days.
Look, if you're asking me if I looked, because what's on deck? I saw it's not the fair. What's it called? I'm missing it. There's some new festival, the Free Tennis Festival, March 15th, right? Yeah,
we have a free tennis festivals for the community, so the whole community can come together and we have these kind of events. So but you don't need any special reasons. Just come and hang around with us, and you can see how we are working every day.
Oh, I look forward to it. Well, Coach, again, thank you so much, and good luck to you and all of your JTC crew, CC crew in the future.
Okay, thanks a lot, hey.